Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Welcome to another episode of our Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm absolutely delighted this afternoon to have Gerry Crispin on the line. Gerry is based over in New York in the grand old US of A. Gerry's been in the recruitment industry for many, many years, a little bit longer than myself. And I'm really excited to introduce Gerry. People don't know too much about Gerry, or may not know about Gerry, so I'm going to get him to tell you all about his experience in the recruitment industry. It's vast, it's wide, he's got a huge amount of knowledge. And one of the subjects I really wanted to speak to Gerry about today is about the candidate experience. It's a hot topic. Just last night, I did a Facebook Live video about this. A lot of candidates still complaining about the experience they're getting with both agencies, but also end customers, where they're just not getting feedback, particularly after the interview process, and it's really damaging organizations' brands. Gerry, thank you so much for being on the show. Gerry, perhaps for our viewers, you could give a little bit of an introduction about yourself, please.
Well, thank you, David. It's a pleasure being here for sure. And yes, it's probably pretty obvious to your listeners, anybody who's watching, that I'm not a millennial. I've been around a few years, enjoy life very much, and I've probably been in some form of recruiting for nearly 50 years now.
Wow.
So that's a long freaking time, for sure. And I still have a ball. So that's just the reality of it. So I view myself as a lifelong student of recruiting. I study things. I do actually make a living. I have a company called CareerXroads. In the 90s, I wrote 8 books about the coming changes in recruitment and human resources as it related to emerging technology. In 2001, I started a community of talent acquisition leaders who wanted to kind of engage each other and, as peers, help each other pull up their bootstraps a little bit. There are now 100 companies participating in that. They hire about 3 million people a year globally. And the talent acquisition leaders from those companies talk to each other either online or face-to-face almost every day. There's 2 other things that I'm just passionate about and getting so much involved in. One, I started a new talent acquisition professional organization this past year. It's been 5 years in the making. A bit behind the scenes on it. It's called ATAP, Association of Talent Acquisition Professionals, and atapglobal.org is the website. People want to get involved in that. I think recruiting should be a profession, not a craft. And as a result, it needs to have a professional association on a global basis that covers that. And I helped to found TalentBoard, which is what you wanted to talk about, 6 years ago. And TalentBoard is a nonprofit that is dedicated to collecting data that helps define what the candidate experience really is and its impact on corporations. And so for the last 6 years, it has been collecting data. This past year in 2016, about 350 companies participated on a global basis, and more than 250,000 of their candidates completed extensive surveys about the experience that they had. And that data is all available and free at a website called The Candies, CANDES, so thecandies.org. Quick overview.
And Gerry, that's great. Thanks for sharing a little bit of that. And just to touch on that part a little bit in a bit more detail, without obviously people can go onto the website and have a look at it. But what would you say are the highlights that organizations are getting from that feedback? What's the things that people are noticing, and what are you seeing is the trends with a candidate experience at the moment?
Well, obviously, this is a very long-term, long-tail issue. Candidate experience is not going to improve significantly unless there's a clear and defined and measurable outcome of either doing it very well or doing it poorly. And so part of what we want to do is collect that evidence, if you will. And we have enough really to demonstrate that there's a series of 5 different buckets that correlate extremely highly to how a candidate will rate a company. And none of them are surprises, but the fact that we can so clearly define the outcome of not doing it well or doing it well means that we're now in a position to offer to companies the ability to now measure the cost of doing it poorly or the reward of doing it well. And those 5 buckets are not in any particular order, but setting expectations and delivering on them. So it's not a surprise that the better you are able to tell people about the job that they're going to be in for, the better off you are. But it's not just the job, it's also the process of getting that job. So the failure that many companies have is not being able to explain or assuming that a candidate understands or has expectations that are similar to yours about how long it would take for you to get back to them once they've applied, for example, or what's going to take place in the day that they come in for the interview, or how long is it going to take before, after you tell somebody, oh, I'll get back to you in a week, we're trying to wrap this up right now, there's only 2 more candidates to come in, and then no one ever calls them back. Those are the kinds of things that go to the heart, if you will, of the pain that a candidate will go through. So that's one of those issues. If I, as a candidate, and let's say I'm a great candidate, and I see that great job that you have, but I want to ask a question about it, who do I ask? So the ability to listen to a candidate, respond to them, is also a major factor these days in terms of how a candidate will rate that experience. Third issue is something kind of weird. It's this perception of fairness, that after I've experienced what you've got to offer, do I think that I've been treated in a fair way, that I've been on an equal platform with other companies, with other candidates, or do I feel that you've kind of singled me out to get rid of me because of who I am, because I'm older, or because of my name, or because of something else? What is the message that I'm getting from you that suggests that this is fair or not? One of the odd examples of this that we've seen done as an A/B test and change the rating is simply to ask a candidate as the last question in the interview process, or the last question on the application, or the last question even on the phone screen, is, what didn't I ask you about your skills, knowledge, and experience that you'd like to tell me now that you think help you to be competitive for this job? Because what we tend to do is get so full of ourselves in terms of the things we know we want to know about that individual that we fail to think about what the individual believes is the reason why they became interested and why they think they're competitive for the job. So that helps to set the playing field. Another company for like Genentech, which is part of Roche, by the way, is they make it a requirement that anybody who comes in for an interview take an interview training program that they offer prior to coming in, with the intent of telling the candidates that the reason we require it is so that everybody is on the same platform, if you will, and that we can evaluate you and you can evaluate us based upon all being able to interview and not create that halo of who interviews best gets the job. It doesn't eliminate it totally, but it at least makes that effort in terms of that fairness issue. Finalizing, telling somebody, hey, you didn't get the job. You've got to be able to do that. And the longer it takes to do that, the lower the rating you will get. So it's those kinds of things that we understand. If they basically are not taken care of, your net promoter score, which is one of the ways that we're now measuring candidate experience in an ongoing way, is going to absolutely be lower, without a doubt. Oh, by the way, the fifth bucket is holding the recruiter accountable for candidate experience. It's one of the more obvious ones, is if you measure it, they will attend to it.
Gerry, you made some good points there, and one of the challenges of being an external recruiter is how you get buy-in from that hiring manager to agree to the feedback. What's your view on that?
I think that the critical issue is first of all the measurement. So if you are holding a recruiter accountable, he will build the skills that will engage that hiring manager. Mm-hmm. And if he's not able to do that, he's going to challenge you as the boss to get somebody else to support that hiring manager, because I can't deal with it. And we should either drop that sucker, or we should find somebody who can slap him upside the head.
I totally agree. And moving on to that, changing a culture of an organization who is particularly poor at giving feedback, who's not good at giving feedback, needs to come from the top. But, how do organizations change? Because there's lots of companies out there. I could name lots of them right now, Gerry, that are terrible.
Easy. It just takes a long time. You have to be old like me to see the change. But here's the point. The point is you have to translate into the dollars that it's going to cost the leader. So if I can sit down with the leader of the organization and say to them, listen, if we don't do this well, here is the cost to us, that it goes from 60% of the people willing to come back when they're ready, when they've got more skills and knowledge, and automatically apply for a new job, to 5%. The cost of finding another 55% of all those people we've invested this much on is going to be X, and it's tens of thousands of dollars per job to be able to accomplish that. You now have to find more new people each and every time for those critical jobs, rather than be able to cherry pick all those people you've gotten engaged and gotten fully interested. It's telling them, how many people they are going to tell, and what percentage of all the people, including the person who experienced it, is going to stop buying your product if you're a retail person, and what the cost is of losing that many customers over the course of the next year. It's those kinds of things that the data's there.
You're so right. And again, just a real world example as a recruiter, I could name a number of people who, if you call a candidate, they will just say, I'm not interested in that because I heard from a colleague they had a terrible interview experience, and I can't be bothered to go through that process. So the knock-on effect, the damage it's doing to their potential candidate pool is massive.
Generally, for 500,000 candidates, 500,000 candidates have completed surveys, a third of them who had a bad experience will stop buying product. I'm just saying, that's a lot of money.
Scary numbers. And what's, again, another big challenge I hear a lot, especially this week, sometimes it's so easy to apply for jobs now, and there's so many ways to do it, and it's easy to apply, and I'm not saying everyone's suitable for every vacancy, but how do organizations manage, what's the next steps to managing the sheer volume of CVs sent, to keep that candidate engaged, but with the human side? And obviously, I don't know what your view is on recruitment bots and AI coming, and there's some stuff already out there, but what's your view?
There is some stuff already out there, and yes, I think recruitment bots that will appear as human, as you and I, will be more consistent than you and I in being able to help a recruiter say to each and every single candidate, the 99 that did not get the job, that they didn't get the job, and I'm sorry, we're not going forward with you. But here are some of the things that you might want to consider in terms of improving your skills, knowledge, and experience, so that next time you will be able to compete more effectively. And
that's it. Absolutely.
And if I could do that, and I could do that in minutes with simply pushing a button on a computer and putting John or Amy or Olivia or somebody else as a chatbot into that mode, I'm going to start seeing some new shifts in how I operate. Because right now, you're overwhelmed if you've got hundreds of candidates and only a couple of those that you've done. You have very little tools at your disposal to be able to tell each and every person in a kind of a customized way that they didn't get the job. But you still have to do it. And most employers and don't hold recruiters accountable, and most recruiters do not even today respond to all those candidates that didn't get the job by at least telling them, I'm sorry, we're not going forward with you. We have filled this position at this time. We don't like to do that. We only like to tell the person who got the job. We don't want to tell anybody else. But that's so short-sighted, and it's simply because we don't require that as a fundamental, basic component of who we are and what we do.
I agree, and I think there's so many other factors in perhaps why people don't get back to candidates after they've been rejected. Obviously, apart from that human element of not enjoying letting people down, but
we're not sure the other person's going to show up at the last day, so we're going to hold off to the side.
That's right.
Those 2 or 3 best candidates that we're going to keep in the dark as long as we possibly can. That's such bullshit. I got to tell you. That's such a bad, old-fashioned 20th century, 19th century approach to recruiting.
I love what you said about Roche. I know the company in the pharma sector talking about interviewing training program for employees.
Yep.
But what do you see as the next thing organisations are going to need to do to create that culture of giving amazing feedback and seeing the value from that? What are organisations going to need to do in the future?
Well, what they are doing. So the companies that are moving the needle are systematically looking at the journey that a candidate takes from the point at which they begin to research the corporation, the first moments in which a sourcer is engaging them and getting them interested, and looking at each touch point in each segment of the recruiting process all the way through onboarding. Onboarding becomes as critical as the research. But looking at those, and actually there are dozens, if not hundreds, of touch points along that journey, and map them out and look at, for each of those touch points, what in fact is the reaction of candidates to that particular process. Because the world has been shifting, the technology is changing, and so to assume that each touch point has the same power that it did years ago or that it does going forward is to make a serious mistake. We need to rethink and reorganize our practices to be candidate-centric. And if they're not, we're missing the boat in terms of competing downstream, for sure.
Gerry, I'm sure you could speak for hours about it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that we're going to have people asking questions who'd love to have some feedback. I'd love to have you on as a guest in a later edition, if that's okay. I'll put a few links. I'll put a few links up for how people can get in touch with you. And look, thank you so much again, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
You bet, David. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.